Pause before I present, that's great, thank you. Alright, so we want to talk about mentoring today. It's been mentioned through, I've been for the last 2 days, which has been terrific. It's been mentioned throughout the few days. What I want to get from you guys is, what do you think mentoring is? It's all well and good for me to say mentoring is da 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 da, but we need to get a clear definition so we're all going about what mentoring is. So I've got one up there.
It's like guidance, so to speak.
Guidance, yeah, that's good. What else? Anyone? Ben?
In a way, it's handing on the baton, showing people what to do.
Handing on the baton. Is that French?
I don't know.
Sorry, yes.
Mentoring is an experienced person supporting someone through the learning process as they learn and giving them guidance and support as they request it.
I think you better come up. A mentor is an experienced person helping others in essence. Fabulous, thank you. Yes, any others? We can probably all go home now, that's all.
It's not necessarily formal
Yeah.
training.
Yeah, no, good point. So it's not formal training,
That's right.
it's just some experience stuff.
Working
So,
alongside?
so again,
Working alongside?
yeah, it could be working alongside, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're comfortable that in the context of what we're talking about, mentoring is someone's experience, passing on the baton, what else was there, and guidance, all right? Which is great. The reason I ask the question is quite often mentoring gets mixed up with coaching and with instruction and with assessment and with appointments and so on. So we need to be clear when you're talking about it in the context of the people you're dealing with, you need to be clear that it's not necessarily about instruction, or it's not necessarily about, I guess, the hard and fast way of doing any particular thing. You guys are all instructors, I understand, yeah? Yeah or no?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. We're getting there. So you're all instructors, so you've probably filling a mentor type role anyway, but you're also filling an instructor role. So the question I've got for you then is, if is it a junior instructor or
Assistant instructor.
an instructor, and then what's the super instructor?
Assistant instructor.
Assistant and what?
Level 3.
Level 3. Okay, so level 3 I'm assuming is a super duper.
Chief is up. Chief is
Chief instructor. Okay.
Couple over there, so.
So if I'm an instructor and I go to the chief instructor and say, can you be my mentor? Ross, will you be my mentor and help me through this, please? I'm pretty weak on this and that and that and that and that. Okay, I've just asked my mentor and I've told him all my failings. Ross is the one who's going to assess me to say, you're the next level. Well, no, sorry, I've just told you how poor I am. He knows how poor I am. He's the assessor. So be careful. That's why I'm trying to get a clear definition of, if you're a mentor, you've got to be careful that you're not the person that's going to say to me. So Ross says to me, yeah, you can't go to the next level because you don't know enough about all this stuff. You might be able to fudge it when you're doing your assessments, but if you're telling your mentor who is the assessor or the appointer or whatever you have, you need to be very careful of that. So keep that in mind when you're doing this mentoring stuff. You know, the experience stuff is fabulous, but it's about a conversation you have. But just relate a couple of slides. Keep in mind these 3 questions when we're talking about mentoring a little bit. So, what's influenced you the most? What motivates you to become a mentor? And what are your expectations? Keep those 3 questions in mind for a little bit down the track. A little bit of background. So, Beverly Kay's done a whole lot of work on mentoring. Behind every successful person, there's one element of truth. Somewhere, somehow, someone cared about their growth and development. So that person was a mentor. So the experience situation. All right, that's just one definition. Another one from Anne Rolfe that I've done some work with. Mentor provides information, shares experience, or expresses an opinion. However, it's always the mentee that decides, acts, and produces outcomes. That's the other part of this situation we've got to be careful of. All right, I'm a mentor. I know everything. Ross knows everything. He'll tell me what to do when I need to do it. How does that help me? Think about the people you're trying to mentor. They're the ones that have got to drive this. They're the ones that have got to say, Ross, I can't do this. I need some help. Or I know Ross is the instructor, so I might go, Nicola, I need some help in doing some my instructor training. Can you help me through these 3 or 4 areas that I reckon I'm weak in? Now I know that she's not going to tell Ross, even though they work in the same office, and I know that Ross is not going to go and say, what about that Peter Top? What was the story with him? He's hopeless. So you see where there's a clear distinction about the mentee and being the one that drives this stuff. All right, on your tables, I just want you to talk about what it might not be. So what is mentoring not? Just in your tables? Just in your tables, just have a quick 2-minute discussion. What mentoring is not?
That's sort of come under to be someone from another way.
Mentoring will teach me
Let's have a couple of responses. Just from the group in general.
Not being a know-all.
Not being the know-all. Yeah. Who knows a know-all? Plenty of them around, I tell you. And then sometimes they look in the mirror. What other things have we got?
Stonewalling ideas.
Say?
Stonewalling ideas.
Stonewalling ideas, yeah. Tell me more.
So if someone has a great idea, like, you know, as a mentor, you know, you listen to all ideas, whether they're stupid or,
Yep.
or otherwise,
Yep.
And you know, not putting up barriers and saying, hey, you know, that's not a good idea.
True.
You know, like letting people be creative and listen to their ideas.
Yep. Sometimes I get that. So it's not stonewalling ideas. Any ideas a reasonable idea? Some ideas are stupid, but in your mind, but in that person's mind, if they're willing to say it, then it's not a stupid idea. It's just their idea. Good point.
Mentor your volunteers.
Mentor your volunteers. There's a novel idea. Yeah. Well, yep, absolutely.
It's not part of the assessment process.
Fantastic. So it's not part of the, that's critical. It's not part of the assessment process. Certainly you can get some help. I'll go back to my example over here. I've used Nicola on the side to help me get through the assessment part, but that's not part of the formal assessment process. Good stuff, yeah?
But as part of the instructing structure of the organisation,
Yeah.
the choice of mentors and their skills has to be carefully watched as well, because mentoring can lead to malpractice or bad practices.
Yeah. And that's a critical.
That's a balancing
Yeah,
act.
that's certainly balancing act for sure. Yeah, and that's something good for you. Yeah, we got a couple. Yeah.
They must not be unavailable. So a mentor has to be available, even if it's on a program or you know, a regular sort of time frame. You know, they must be able to the mentee must be able to see that.
Yeah, fair point. But I can't get there that weekend. Can you still do it with me?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's maybe not available. Might not be the right technology available at different times, different ways. I mean, we've got we've all sorts of things now. Skype, you get in Facebook, and so on and so on. Yeah, good. Sorry.
I just question the difference between one-off advice versus mentoring. So someone post-course asks you for your opinion on something or advice, you never see them again. It's not really mentoring.
Well,
as opposed to someone coming back after a while and then saying...
Agreed. Yeah. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. Anyone got any views on one-off mentoring as opposed to ongoing? Yeah.
I think the one-off question is mentoring, but not a specific mentor.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things about being a mentor is setting an example as well.
Yeah. For sure.
And I think the other thing is that the mentoring relationship needs to have the mentee in the driver's seat, so to speak.
Yeah. So, go back to your comment. It's a great comment. I'm just coming to this event, and again, scenario. You're in England, I'm here, I'm coming to England and I'm just going to coach my team. Can I get you to come along and give me some pointers afterwards? Only once. Is that potentially mentoring? But it's also potentially, again, it depends on my relationship. I might say, oh, I need you to look at the way I speak to my athletes, the way I provide my instruction and so on. So it may be quite specific, so it might be coaching stuff. But the simple questions in terms of the response from the one-off might be, okay, so how did you win? You know, what sort of instruction were you trying to give? What sort of engagement were you trying to get with the athletes? Given if you're overseas, the assumption would be that it's at some sort of major event. It's probably quite specific instruction. This is what we had to do on this particular time. Ongoing stuff like the stuff that you guys are doing will be less so, because it's about ongoing instruction of sailors to become better at it. So they don't fall out of the boat like my colleagues up here in Calamity Cape was yesterday. Okay, so are we comfortable that we know what mentoring is not? Are there any other things you want to add to it?
It's not paid.
It's not paid. Well, there's some organisations where it is, and they're called life coaches. Chris, can I just come back to your scenario? So Chris relayed the story of him mentoring a national champion.
Yeah, that's right.
So the question was, is that mentoring? Is it coaching? How does it all work? Do you want to just relate that story, Chris?
And my role with Tristan to encourage him to become a very successful coach, especially in the laser class, but he's also taken it up in the with some of the Optimus sailors as well. But it's working extremely well. But as a mentor, my role is just to make sure that those opportunities are in front of him. As a sailor that spends a lot of his time in Europe training with one of the Dutch radial sailors, he doesn't have a lot of time, but he can fit this in if the opportunities are painted in front of him. So I see that as mentoring, where the opportunities are available and we can get a better product out of it, and that name will not only remain as a sailor but hopefully as a coach.
Thanks, Chris. What sort of questions do you have for him?
It's about understanding his availability and then how he can actually make his availability work for the sailors. So he actually needs to plan his training days around the availability of his sailors that need his coaching.
Yep.
So yeah, it's been more or less, he's 23 years of age, so the opportunity to use my experience for that. The other thing I found is that he's the Australian team coach at the 4.7 Worlds in Hungary in July. But at this stage, he doesn't have the tools that we as coaches that go to world events have collected. So it's a question of making those tools available, that he's got his wind indicator and his compass and his radio and those sorts of things. So, and that's what he's found very useful in the mentoring situation, where he doesn't have to reinvent the wheel, he can actually just go in and the package is available.
So essentially shortcutting the process, which is great. What sort of questions does he have for you? Given that we want the mentor, remember the mentee's got to drive this, what sort of questions is he as the mentee got for you? And other coaches, I suppose.
Well, one of the problems, especially with the younger people taking on these responsible roles, is what I call the trick things. And you know, one of the things, for instance, I had an athlete at the Worlds who was an asthmatic, and so therefore he was used a puffer, and the puffer has a banned drug. And it's about, well, how do you deal with those things? And knowing what records you have to get, what letters from the doctors, and what forms you have to have, and what you have to carry to actually meet those particular problems if they eventuate. And they have eventuated for me in my career. So yeah, those are the sorts of things that I try and address.
Yep. So are those the sorts of questions that Tristan was asking you?
It came in another way. It came in the form, what else should I know?
Yeah.
The very special loaded question. And yeah.
And look, that
answer's
about as long as the ocean.
But the other thing is when you're taking, as a lot of people in the room have, when you're taking teams away, it's a bit like I get a photocopy of their passports and carry that in my paperwork. And I needed to use that when one sailor lost his passport. It just short-circuited everything really quick.
What I want to do now is I want you guys to do a bit more work on the tables on how mentoring works in sailing currently, how you might think it works, whether you want it to be formally or informally done, and why, because there are, as we've already come across, there are opportunities for it to be quite informal. How you might match up mentors and mentees, and I think that's one of the critical questions you've got to try and address. As instructors, you all know plenty, but the person you're trying to mentor might not be that happy with you being the mentor. So keep that in mind. And what might the roles and responsibilities be? So if we just spend 5 minutes on the tables, just having a chat about that, please.
Or in business. Family, business, sport. They normally go and see. Same principles apply. It may not be a one-on-one mentoring program, it might be on
if it's a situation where someone is seeking mentorship, or whether someone outside.
Yeah, I think move from this both learn how not to do it and learn how to do it.
Alright, let's get some feedback from everyone. What do we have over in the far table? What do you guys come up with?
I'll ask the question, the man will answer that.
Fire away.
How do you match up a mentor and mentee? Who decides that, and how do they make that decision?
Yep.
Where are the scouts gone? Which was a good statement. And the mentor obviously has to be willing.
Yes.
As long as, and what is the expectation of them?
Yes, good question. You can answer?
I will ask the questions. Our conversation basically revolved around setting up different mentoring programs and different ways that you can structure it. A couple of experiences I had when I first got into sailing and how beneficial it was to me. And ways that we're trying to replicate that at the club that I'm with currently. So most clubs have a formal nomination process, that type of thing, where someone nominates someone to be a member of the club, and that would logically be a good person to start off as a mentor for that person. But we're trying to organise some structure around information that we can give to that nominee to help them in their mentoring. So to let them know that there might be an expectation for them to be a mentor for that person in ways that they can improve in their ability to do that right.
Good. Does that answer all your questions?
Getting our seniors, and each group has the junior coaches attached to that group, which then has a lead coach which is attached to that group. And informally is that lead coach looks after the people who we've attached, like the junior trainers, we've attached them. But in my role as a trainer assessor is that when I run the instructor course and I do, and then we have action plans at the end of it, is that my action plan I will formally tell that lead trainer what that guy needs to do, but it's an informal process at the actual yacht club. But I'll actually tell the trainer who's dealing with that person at that particular club what they've got to do with that person.
So it's formally informal.
Correct.
Thanks.
Sort of organisation that is, as you know, in our organisation, we're the Australian Cadets, so we're not a club and we're not any race sailing as a broad club. We have informal mentoring at the moment. It's probably one that we're desirable to formalise some of the process in. Fortunately for us, we've got Richard with us who, when he's not doing our stuff, is a chartered accountant, so he's able to speak in the context of chartered accountants having databases where it has a list of people that have been approached to do mentoring, but ultimately it's the graduates coming through that will then go to that list and try and find like-minded, like-disciplined or local mentors to work with that. So that's covered off on the mentees matched up. The roles and responsibilities, I think, was about shared wisdom, and the last point that I was making is it doesn't always have to be inside your field. as well. I'm mindful of a movie I saw out in Western Australia that showed a young surgeon that had Ian Redpath as one of his mentors, so cricketer. So it doesn't necessarily have to be someone from the field as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, okay. Alright, so especially with our group with the ANC and whatnot, we have obviously delegates and whatnot around all of our states and whatnot, which are actually involved in the sailing side of things. So in the factor of how does the mentoring actually work with the sailing, we try and get as many options out to our cadets as possible so that they do have their choices as to who it is that they're actually willing to go and use as a mentor. And as Bill was saying, there's a lot of trust and respect in it. So obviously trusting comes into when it's the decisions, whether they're going to actually trust that person's opinion in the way of informing them of knowledge and helping them out with the questions that they've got. And respecting also because of the knowledge basis, which is potentially half the reason as to why we're actually here, is to get that knowledge base so that we can support them in that factor.
Cool, thanks, that's great.
You know, placing yourself in a position as an instructor, as a role model, and getting the absolute respect of your students is the paramount element of success. I teach a lot of young students from the local schools. Where we are in Port Stephens, we've got about 1,000 students on the Tomaree Peninsula. None of them have ever been introduced to sailing, and that's why I started the sailing school off. And it's very interesting that a lot of those students have never really achieved in the classroom. They come to the sailing, they learned a sport, they learned an environment that they've never been involved in before. As I was talking to Tom the other day, I said my classroom's totally different from any other classroom. You can't walk on it, except there's only one bloke that I've known that can walk on it. And if you're out there, and the only way to go home is to sail home. Whereas if you're in the land-based environment, it's, oh, well, I'm sick of that, I don't want to concentrate, I'll just walk off. And so I found that it's very important to spend time mentoring these young boys and girls. They need it. We live in a society which is breeding a lot of uncertainty amongst young people. And the avenue of sailing I've found is a magnificent opportunity to win these kids over. So it's not only winning them over in the sport of sailing, but it's a mechanism of connecting them for their future life at the end of their school and into their workforce life. And that's why there's an organisation which we support, which is the Real Futures Foundation, which funds part of the sailing activities, which provides this mentoring for young students going to their school life, because we have the responsibility then that if they do become successful in their occupation, they don't fall through the crack, they're not in the dole, and they don't get in the mischief and torch rubbish things, which we always talk about. They're great kids, the next generation, if they're directed. And I reckon there's never been more responsible in ours, and we've got the great opportunity of sailing as a mechanism because it's unlike a lot of other sports. So think about that, everybody.
Mainly just discussed how much mentoring has been done for us over the older generation, and how much mentoring all of us instructors in this room do for every person who comes to our centres, and their parents too, the same as what fellow mate was talking about down there. So we were mainly just saying that there's a lot of mentoring in the committees. You get one person on the committee and they learn how to do the job. You get one volunteer around this sailing club here. They have 158 volunteers with the purple BMW shirts on. So that's how this club runs. So everybody in this room is doing a hell of a lot of work.
I've got some ideas, but the answers are all here. You guys have the answers. Nicola talks about the networking opportunities and the conversations and the 1,000 beers we all had last night, falling in the water and so on. The answers are out in amongst the group. You don't have to look to someone who is presented as someone who knows everything, because we just said before, the know-it-all is not the person we're after. It's about conversations you have. Mentoring is like that as well. So you may have, as Chris talked about, you may have more than one mentor. You may have more than one coach too. So excellent points. So I just move on quickly. So the purpose of mentoring might be PD, it might be accreditation, it might be updating, it might be fast tracking, and all the other things that we just talked about. Keep kids off the street. You know, mentoring is about a formally informal or informally formal process. Doesn't matter as long as we cover it off. That's something you guys need to work out as a group, but as a sport also. Nicola and I had a conversation around how do you want to do this? Do you want to just leave it as informal as it is and let it happen by accident, or do you want to let it happen by design? And that's something you guys as a sport need to work out. I can't do that. So the benefits of mentoring to the sport, to the mentor and the mentee, we've discussed those at length so far. So to the sport, it's about better instruction in your situation. To the mentor, it's about them having some, some role to fill, because quite often we have, with due respect, some older folk who are starting to fall off in your case, off the side of the boat, that you want to keep in the sport. So mentoring is a perfect opportunity for them to be able to do that. And, you know, you look at most of the other sports, we can get these guys and get girls and ladies and men involved, and they have got a wealth of experience. When I first started doing this sort of stuff, the instructor said to me, "You want a mentor?" Yeah. He said, "Go and find the bloke with the grey hair or the lady with the grey hair, or in my case, the guy with no hair." And they're the people that've got the experience. That's not to say that some of our X and Y gens can't help us. But in terms of mentoring and experience stuff, if that's the information you're after, that's where you'll find it. And have a look around, because they're all here. So there's heaps and heaps of benefits to both the sport and the mentor. The mentees, we talked about the guys, the kids, and and all the the young adults that are coming through. They will benefit enormously. You know, the boys before just showed us how to present some stuff. Don't stand up here and talk at you. Get out and do it. And I think the point was made here before about get out on the water, or get out in the grass, or get out somewhere and do some stuff. That's why I want you guys to keep talking. We'll get you up in just a tick. All right, activities. No, let's forget that. All right, now I want to go through a little communication and feedback sessions. All right, so I've got my two assistants, Amy and Nicola. Right, so we're just going to, it's a sip, bear with me in terms of, I'm not going to give too much instruction because that's the whole lot of you, okay? So just keep in mind. So can I get the two tables on my left there behind the camera? Can you go outside with Amy? Yeah, now.
Go away.
These three tables down the middle here, can you go with Nicola? Sorry, I should have on.
A circle covering the square. Now I want you to draw a rectangle across the circle. Next I want you to draw two lines in the circle. One circle in the square and two circles below the rectangle.
Can I get someone from the middle group there to come up and draw what they've got on their bit of paper? I volunteer. Again, try not to think too much about this. That's it? Okay, good. Right, thank you. So you from the... Which one? Sorry, which one?
From that group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're from the words group. The description group, sorry. Okay, so Amy had a picture that she described to the group, and got them to draw it. All right, Nicola, someone from your group, I'm not sure which ones you got, there's the middle group. I think. Yeah, someone from the middle group, can you come up? How many had visual like Ellis in that from those two groups?
Yep.
Any have it closer to, sorry, your name?
Marco.
Marco? Any have it close to Marco's? Oh no, this down the middle, who had it close to Marco's?
Kind of. I've got the same shape.
I described the squares and triangles and circles I hope so. Alrighty. Well, just have a look at what the group over here did.
No, it's not the same as Marcus.
Alrighty, a little different? You had a picture? Amy had, so Amy had a picture and she's described to her group, this is what I want you to draw. Nicola had words that just said, what would they say, a square, a circle, blah, 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 blah. So you had words to use. You guys had a picture. The reason I did that was, I want to go back to the types of learning styles of the people you guys have. So you will have people who are visual learners. Now obviously all the boys and girls over here are visual learners because they copied the picture quite okay. Alright, the guys down the middle, you had words? Words. So there's only a couple of wordy people in there. And over here we had the auditory ones, where you were just given instruction. So keep in mind the groups that you're instructing to are going to be different. Obviously, that stuff works better. Mix them all together, and the boys talked about in the last session, kinesthetic learners. They learn by doing stuff. Now, I think it's fair to say that the majority of us are kinesthetic learners. We like doing sailing stuff. Would that be fair to say? How many actually like watching, looking at the picture and actually copying that in terms of, not compared to sailing, but in terms of instruction? Who could follow a diagram and go out and do it? Anyone comfortable? Yeah? Someone asked. Okay, so the whole idea is they're visual learners. The kinesthetic learners, you'll take them out on a boat and you'll get to do stuff. So the next slide just gives you some idea of the sorts of things. Those are visual learners. They like charts, graphs, maps, images, that sort of stuff. Keep in mind, that's one set of people. Then there's the auditory ones. They'll actually, rather than just have the words told to them, they might like to discuss it. So they might come up with, if they have the conversation about, now, you get the words. So Nicola might have said, now it's a square with a circle at the bottom left-hand corner. Well, is it completely in the bottom corner, or is it covering half of it, or what it is? So as a group, or as that sort of learner, they might discuss what it's going to look like. Recording the key points and key words. Now, a lot of us have probably finished university by now, but a lot of the university stuff now is done by the presentations available online. So a lot of the lectures are done like that now. So they read writers, and it doesn't necessarily apply in this context because our images are a little bit different. So it's about lists, it's about headings, it's about written cues, phases, that sort of stuff. And as I said, the kinesthetic learner is the one who actually does learn stuff by doing it. So that just gives you some idea of various learning styles. And keep that in mind. You're instructors. You'll have kids that are doing stuff. You'll have adults that are doing stuff. We talked about the baby boomers and the X gen and the Y gen and the Z gen and every other thing in the last session. Keep in mind that they all learn differently. But even within the groups, they will probably learn differently as well. So whilst I've said this is a an auditory learner, this is a visual learner, and demonstrated it, doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way they're only going to be. Because a lot of them are combinations of. Alright, so back to mentoring. So where does that fit in mentoring? It fits in the process. So our process, and Nick will have these later so you don't have to worry about copying them down. So the simple process usually starts at the middle. We usually set a goal in a mentoring process. So coming back to our conversations earlier about what the mentoring formal part of it might look like in an informal sense, or might be an informal with a formal process around it. Doesn't matter, either way, it can work. So we set a goal, we establish an agreement, come back to our question from our gentleman over there. Once, is it twice, is it 10 times, is it a season, is it a year, is it ongoing? What is it? That's not for me as the mentor, that's not for me to know, it's for the mentor to seek out. Now, if the mentee doesn't ask, what do?
Ask them.
Yeah. They're the ones that are going to drive this thing, not you. You might like to think it makes you feel good because you'll keep answering their questions, but it's about them driving it. So make sure that the agreement is about them putting stuff in place. Alright, develop a bit of a plan. So it might be some specific stuff. I'll show you some vision in a bit around some specifics around a plan. Meetings and observations. So how is this going to work? When am I going to do this? So the stuff that Chris has got with Tristan, it might be, well, I can only get to Brisbane twice, and I get to Sydney 4 times, I get to Melbourne 3 times, where are you going to be in those? So make sure you know those sorts of things as mentors. Feedback, we'll talk about feedback in just a little tick, in a little more detail. Some actions following that conversation, and then you've got to review it. And at the end of the day, you might say, well, yep, done and dusted. Thanks, got to move on. But you might also say, well, yeah, that part worked because I identified those 2 or 3 things at the very beginning, but I might also have some other stuff that I want to do. And that's about the relationship you have with your mentee. And if you've got a good relationship with them and they are getting lots out of it, then they will be sucking it up like you won't believe. But if it's a rubbish relationship, what's going to happen? You know the answer. Alright, so that's the sort of stuff you need to keep in mind with that one. I want to now have a look at that first meeting that you'll have with your mentee. Just got a little bit of vision I want you to watch while I... What I want you to do now in your groups is just have a talk about the questions that the mentee asked and the questions that the mentor asked. And then what was the resulting actions out of all that, in terms of what was the plan that they put in place. 2 minutes? Let's go. Fire away.
From what we got for it, you have to set goals for the mentor and the mentee, and a time frame for it, so you don't just keep going over your same steps. Work on your strengths and weaknesses. Don't just try and show your weaknesses so other people can help you work on that. Build trust with each other, so you can talk about stuff that you're not good at and stuff that you are good at, so that eventually you can start doing a bit more work by yourself. Yeah. Make sure you have a good working relationship.
Yep. Okay, the first thing they pretty much did is she approached the intended mentor because of noticing him around and what he was doing.
Yep.
So therefore she knew that the experience level was there and would be a valuable person to use as a mentor. Yep. So when she asked that, he advised her straight away of his availability and that he noticed that she was also doing that and was requiring something of that nature. She was happy with the availability that he had. His next question was to find out what the mentee was actually expecting, so finding out what they actually wanted to get out of him being a mentor. She responded with her needs and he offered a plan based on the availability that he had, and she was happy, and therefore they formed the agreement initially. Yep. And
he all self-described his expectations, and then basically he started to straight away get into the mentoring, advising her to set goals and set expectations of what they wanted to both get out of it.
Who wants to learn how to tack? Someone? I reckon Nicola should learn how to tack. Yeah, because you picked me to do the demonstration, so there you go, you get to be involved. I need someone to give me something that can be a tiller or like... the microphone's over to London. Okay. Is this on? No, good. Okay. Alright, so pick a seat. Anyone? Right, okay. So, getting there. Give me a chance here. Yeah, no, that's perfect attire. It's good. Covered toes, unlike mine. That's great. Alright, so we're imagining here that you're on a boat. Front of the boat is up this direction. Stern of the boat's back down in this direction. And this is your tiller that you're using. Yeah? So we're going to have one hand on the tiller and one hand on what's going to be our imaginary rope, which is controlling our mainsail. Yeah? And what we're going to do is we're going to turn around and go back in the other direction. And during that process, the boom's going to change sides. So we're going to need to duck under it. And we're going to have to change sides of the boat so that we can balance the new power that we've got. Yeah? Okay. So, there's a few steps that we're going to go through. The first one is that we're going to check over our shoulders. We don't want to run into anyone when we turn around. So, good look over both shoulders. Excellent. Okay. Now, the second thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your back leg and you're going to put it across and forward in the boat. Yes? Excellent. Perfect.
Hey, Goldie, where you been?
Where have I been?
We got the 18 tiller. Let's get rid of the dinky little toy. But this is the bit, guys. You decide the height of the boom.
So the boat's going to slowly start to turn, and as that happens, the boom's going to start to gently move into the middle. But we don't have to because you're turning slowly. So then you're going to move towards the middle of the boat, making sure that you're ducking under the boom. Which is coming across like this, and as you are, with this elbow down a little bit, you're going to pass the tiller behind your back. I'll give you a bit more distance on that long tiller. No, you're holding onto the rope. So tiller's coming around behind your back like this, and the hand with the rope comes still holding the rope back to your tiller. Yep, and you hold both in the same hand, and as the boom's coming out here, you can sit down on the new side, and the front hand grabs your rope again, and you've done it.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Nicola. Let's give him some feedback. What worked?
Explanation.
Humour, yeah. Explanation, yeah.
Thanks,
guys.
Props. Now, sorry.
Props.
Props, yeah.
Clear instruction.
Clear instruction, good.
Sequencing.
Sequencing, yeah.
Being interactive.
Yeah, yeah. Spot on, yeah.
Tone, as in being approachable, not dictating.
Yep.
Praise.
Praise?
Praise.
Praise, sorry, yes. Yeah, great. Do you want to say that again, Chris, or?
What about explaining the rationale behind it?
Explain the rationale. Did he explain the rationale, Amy?
I think when he was instructing about why you look behind your shoulder and everything.
Yeah. So some of the maybe risk management stuff. What else worked for us? Remember, simple question is, what worked for us?
He repeated the important.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think he selected a subject that hasn't been involved, so it made it more realistic.
Yep.
He related it back to the environment.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, good. So that's what worked. What didn't work?
Well, we didn't break it down to steps by steps. There's 33 steps to tackle the boat.
And you wonder why people don't want to sail.
We hit them with the hard bit first,
Yeah.
and then you break it down to the little bits.
Thanks,
and then you teach them to rock from side to side, length,
Yeah.
body weight, control, and then break it down, and then by then down to the natural sail.
Yeah.
So you've got the different levels.
Got it. Thanks.
probably an initial demonstration.
Yep. Yep. So that's what else good? What else didn't work for us? Yeah.
Was there one thing too was sort of selling the idea of why you actually need to tap. You know,
Yeah.
say okay, well, today we're going to go to a cool beach, but to get there, we need to learn how to tap.
Yeah.
Not using the real thing.
Not using. Yeah. So yeah.
Switching between terminology between front and stern, or left and port. You use both.
Yeah. What else didn't work?
It wasn't in real time.
Was in real time? Just tell me more.
It was slow. If you did that in the boat would be over in time.
Oh, okay.
How do you communicate that in real time? That's why we put it on the shore.
How much of the bank must have been done against Anything else didn't work for us?
He was actually walking on water to do it. He was outside.
Graham was talking about me before. It's a skill that
I'm surprised that no one said it wasn't on the water, but that's okay. So we come to what did work. Alright, so the last question is what we need to fix. If you're giving Tom some feedback, what do we need to fix?
Take his beard off.
Take his beard off, yeah, okay. Not sure that's going to happen.
Give the initial demonstration.
Say again?
Give the initial demonstration.
Give the initial
so
demonstration.
They can see the best practice.
Yep. What else?
I remember it was good on a whole, and there was only little things that needed to be adjusted to make it better.
Yep.
The body language of him?
Body language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, once you teach them the body language, then the people know that person can't sail, so give them a bit of distance,
Yeah.
I reckon the initial introduction to tacking is spot on. I don't think that you would want to do it any more intricate than that in the first way.
Yeah.
Now that they understand that part, then you can probably take it a little bit more into real time where they actually put a shitterboat in or put him in the shallow.
Planning, so I know it's just a short notice thing, but he came out without his training aids in his hand and ready.
All right.
I think that if everyone in this room could take on board Tom's demonstrations that he did then, take it back to your training establishments, we'll be all better for it. Well done, Tom.
Thanks, good note to finish on. So
Praise
the
informed
point of that
praise.
was, I asked Nicola to find someone for me during a break that could demonstrate something because we wanted to give some feedback. It wasn't about the actual demonstration or our reel or not, but it's about feedback. So the feedback, the three critical questions you need to remember when you're giving feedback. What worked? What didn't work? What do we need to fix? So you as instructors, the critical, they're just the three questions you need. You don't need anything else. You just need those three. Answer those three and the person will progress. Don't make it too confusing. Don't make it too complex. It's what worked, what didn't work, and what I need to fix. It's as simple as that in terms of feedback. Just want to show you a video in terms of feedback that we, again, this is one of the videos that we produced at the commission, and it's just around the feedback. Come on, that one. Okay, so let's just talk about in your group said, again, just take on 1 or 2 minutes. Let's just talk about how the mentor established the rapport. So what were the sort of things that Mick said to Jerry when I was walking down the corridor to relax and make him feel a little more comfortable with what we're doing? What sort of questions did he ask? How did he show that he was attentive and interested? How was the action plan developed? And what were the next steps? And also, I want you to reflect on the conflict, the uncomfortable couple of moments there when he challenged the young fellow on who was in charge of the game. Just 2 minutes. Anytime. rapport.
So they discussed the game, but not specific to the particular person's role. So the crowd noise, the big close game, etc.
Yep, spot on. Okay, next one.
He asked open questions along the lines of how you felt, the game went today. How did you assess your own performance, and what things were you comfortable with? And just open-ended questions which allow the person to reflect on his performance and give some honest self-reflection.
Yeah, great. So, just hang on the microphone for a sec. Sorry, Amy. So you're talking about open questions.
Yes.
Tell me about closed questions.
Good game today, wasn't it?
Yes.
It's a yes or no.
Yeah.
Bad performance though, wasn't it? Yes or no.
Yeah.
So, open question. How did you feel he went today? How was the flow of the game? Things allowing the bloke to elaborate.
Great, thank you.
He kept eye contact, and he was specific about some of the things he did in the game, so as though he did pay attention and was looking towards him. He had some video clips to show.
Yeah. Spot on. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. So the mentor actually took some time to put the vision together, or grab the game from the telly or whatever.
Yeah.
He sort of self-determined where things had gone wrong, and looking at the video, and from there what strategies he put in place that wasn't given to him.
Yeah. So he's a little specific, wasn't he?
Yes, I'll move back. I'll get back into the Aussie role, or so rugby things a bit lost on me.
But that's spot on. The Jerry identified what he thought he needed to do. I made the mistake because didn't have Mick Stone saying you made a mistake because you're in the wrong position. All right, somewhere up there. Let's talk about the conflict or the perceived uncomfortableness, if you like. Anyone over there?
Quite interesting, because he, as soon as that incident, the first thing he did was close off with his crossed arms, with his body language. You could see that. So the person giving the feedback had to really work there to pull him back out of it. And he actually did it quite well, because he did pull him out, and he saw him open up back into the conversation again, which was good. And I thought he did the whole job pretty well.
Yep, good, thank you. The characteristics of a successful relationship. I mean, you can read as well as I, but we'll go through them. So, a good rapport is absolutely critical. Trust and confidentiality. I can't emphasise enough the confidentiality stuff. We talked about at the very beginning, where I said Ross was going to be my mentor, and he's going to also assess me. Well, nah, not going to work. So you need to consider that in process. It could happen, but you might get someone else to do the assessing. Trust and confidentiality. So I'm telling some stuff to Nicola as my mentor. I've got to have confidence that if I'm telling her some information, it's going to be kept there and nowhere else. Oh, Peter, he's here. Can't have that. All right, clear objectives and goals. We've talked about that time and time again. Mutual respect. So, if you're not respecting your mentor, likewise, if you don't respect the mentee, don't waste your time, because you sure as hell wasting theirs. Clear communication and feedback. We've been through a couple of communication and feedback sessions. Comfortable in the environment. Would you go down to the bar and say, Nicola, come down and have a drink, and we'll just go down there with everyone and we'll talk about the relationship? Would that work? I don't think so. Make it so that everyone's comfortable with what you're doing. It's a shared experience. You can make it a bit of fun. There's nothing wrong with being a bit of fun. It doesn't have to be Cedric serious the whole time. It's got to be a bit of fun. Acknowledge and celebrate the achievements. Talk about Chris talking about Tristan. Celebrate those achievements with them. Yay, we did this. Or bad luck, we didn't do that. And be supportive. Alright? Some do's and don'ts. Allow the mentee to drive the relationship. Have reasonable expectations. Remember, most of the time these people you're mentoring are probably still learning. Likewise, if you are seeking a mentor, keep in mind they'll probably realise that you are still learning. So make sure you tell them, I'm learning this, you need to help me a bit. Confidentiality, I've already talked about. Respect for others. Don't be afraid to take risks, to do things differently. So if things aren't working, change it. The boys talked about it, and we had the session yesterday on inclusion. If it's not working, change it. For goodness sake, make it different. Otherwise, we're just going to, you know, what do we say? If you keep doing what you've always done, you'll get what you always got. Which generally doesn't work. Don't expect to be able to solve all their problems. It's a good point to have. Acknowledge their achievements, talk about that, and avoid the mentee becoming absolutely dependent on you. You know, quite often the relationship go on and on. We talked about the one session. Is that enough? Maybe. Don't let it go on forever and ever, because that becomes hopeless. That's me. Got some questions, but before we do, everyone stand up and face left. Okay, pat the other person on the back. Good job. Turn the other way. Turn the other way. Come on, folks. Thank you very much.